All across Russia, people are wondering, what the hell is happening? We see Russians recording crying videos from their cars about the long lines to the gas station. We see videos of these lines from the ground. We see these lines being filmed from the sky. And we even see images of these fuel lines from the satellites. So those lines are so long that they're even seen from space. Russia transitioned from the gas station state to there is no more gas state. And in the meantime, Putin is saying that everything is fine, no need to worry about, it's all gonna be good. And no one is really believing him. Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Fuel crisis is hitting Russia from the different aspects, and most importantly, both economically and politically. And the costs are skyrocketing. So let's look into it and see what's up. By this point, with varying estimates, we can say that Ukraine took out roughly 50% of Russian fuel refining capabilities. Some sources claim lower numbers, some sources claim higher numbers, but let's say around 40 to 50 on average. And that is a lot, and that is hitting Russia on a lot of different levels. On the surface, it is just a lot of Russians not liking that there is no fuel. There is now long lines to get that fuel. But the economic issues are actually a lot more devastating when you start looking in depth. Specifically, if we look at the occupied territories, Crimea or the occupied south of Ukraine, then Ukrainian strikes over there have already created a crisis of fuel to an extent that it is almost impossible for civilians to get any fuel. A lot of businesses just cannot physically operate. And more importantly, even if they could operate, right now the reports are that cargo transport prices have risen 6 times from the moment Ukraine started their campaign in the south of Ukraine. And that's not even taking into account all of those transportation companies that just don't want to operate or deliver any goods or fuel to the occupied territories. But the crisis also is happening in the attached Russian territories where Ukrainian drones can reach. There is also massive shortages. But fuel lines are actually happening all across Russia. For example, some of the images that we saw with these long lines, they're actually from Siberia, central Russia, far away from Ukraine, some 2,000-3,000 kilometers away from Ukrainian border. How is this happening? Russia is repeating Soviet mistake. What you might not know is that the Russian state is actually heavily subsidizing Russian fuel manufacturers. They are artificially asking them to keep the fuel prices low. This is part of the Russian general agreement. Yes, everything bad in the country, it's true, but we have low fuel prices. And this has been happening for years. This whole system that Russia is paying fuel manufacturers to make sure they sell the fuel price under the market is now coming to bite Russia itself. Because with Ukraine taking out the Russian refining capabilities, Russia is now looking for ways to try to circumvent it. They are now supposedly in talks with India, Kazakhstan, and some other states to try to get extra fuel into the country. The problem with this is that this model is incredibly dumb. And step by step, it looks like this. Russia is selling their oil on the markets, and they were benefiting from higher oil prices a little bit, but now the oil prices are going down, and we're getting back to that situation that we were before. And Russia is selling their oil with a discount because it is dangerous to buy Russian oil, as you can get hit by secondary sanctions at any moment. And in generally, it is very cumbersome to get it. So Russian oil is being bought with a discount. Then the oil gets refined in, for example, India, from where Russia is then buying fuel. And again, there is no oil pipes from India. So there are tankers that are going to load the fuel into the tankers and they will take it back to Russia. Once again, very juicy targets. And Russia, when they're buying fuel for India, India knows the dire situation that Russia is finding themselves in. So they're actually selling fuel to Russia by the market price, and actually even a little bit above the market price, because just Russia is so desperate for fuel. And now Russia has bought their fuel on the markets with arguably market price or even higher. They're getting that fuel into the country, but now because they're used to have the lower price for the fuel, so they're selling now fuel in the country under the market price because they don't want to see the price hike even more, losing money on every step of this way of this model for absolutely no reason. I mean, the reason is there. It is because Putin started an aggressive war in the middle of Europe and acting as a complete maniac. But that is beyond the point. The reality is this model is absolutely insane. And Russia, the important part is that despite all of this, despite them trying to keep the low prices and high demand is what causes specifically the shortages. When there is a high demand on the market, no matter how much you're essentially proposing, and if it's not a satisfied demand, there is going to be always the shortages. The normal market economy would adjust to that increased demand by raising up prices. But as we just discussed, Russia is not ready to have this huge increase in fuel prices. So instead, they're pushing the prices artificially down, which causes shortages despite the amounts of fuel they're going to be buying, and all of the Russians are going to continue being stuck in the fuel lines and having some scalpers get the fuel and sell them with an additional markup. The gas shortage in Russia is not caused by the market forces. It is actually caused by the Ukrainian armed forces. So support Ukrainian armed forces right now. Join the fundraiser. Let's get it done, and let's make sure that Ukrainian armed forces have all the necessary tools to beat Russia into the ground and make sure that Putin never again comes to European soil to threaten anyone ever again. Support the Ukrainian armed forces. So the shortage of fuel is not going to go away. Ukrainian capabilities are only rising as new and newer weapons are being developed in Ukraine. We're talking about now ballistic missiles that Russia will just not have the capability to intercept almost completely. And the issues, as I mentioned, go way beyond just people standing in lines, businesses not being able to get fuel into their trucks. It's also impacting the international relationship with Russia. A good example was from the region of Zabaikalia, where supposedly the governor of that region, he looked at the shortage of fuel in his region, and he looked at the truckers, specifically Chinese truckers, that are getting goods into Russia from China. He says, well, they're filling up a lot more fuel, so therefore we need to make sure that they stop fueling up on our gas stations. And now suddenly this impacts the whole international trade. Once again, we're just 1 month into Ukrainian campaign, and there's still more to come, and it's going to get just much, much worse for Russia. But what is arguably even worse for Putin is the political impact. Russia is a pretend state. They try to pretend that they are this unstoppable machine for the world, that they can do whatever they want. And it took Ukraine a lot of time to actually prove that this is not the case, despite us here on this channel talking about this from day one. But finally, this kind of settles into the political aspect of the world. But for the internal audience, Putin was selling different narratives. He was selling the narrative of stability. Like, with me in charge, nothing is gonna happen to you. You're gonna have everything and there is nothing to worry about. War? What war? It's all just our volunteers that are fighting over there. All of these fuel shortages, that is just temporary. Nothing is happening. And they are now having this aggressive campaign in Russia where they're trying to state that everything is going to be fine. Don't worry about it. It's like sort of a just don't look up scenario. That whatever you see before your eyes, all of these lines, That is all just because of the high demand, because of seasonal aspects. You know, summer, people just drive everywhere. That is how it's being explained in Russia. The problem is Russians don't really believe that. They are fighting in lines to get access to fuel. They are directly observing this aspect of the Russian economy, and they're able to interact to each other, share opinions. They are starting to see their fellow countrymen face to face, and they are angry, and more importantly and badly for Putin, that they blame Putin for it. They don't care about Ukraine. They never cared about the civilians being killed. They don't care about the war crimes. They don't even care about their own soldiers being completely annihilated by the Ukrainian armed forces. They don't care about any of this. But once you start putting them in uncomfortable positions, suddenly they are like, well, how is this happening? They are now starting to look for information and find out that the information is blocked. They start installing these software that allows them to go around some of these blocks of the social media, and they start getting news from different sources, talking about the issues of Russia world stage, talking about the issues of Russia in Ukraine, and more importantly, they're starting to discuss these things and link them all to one person specifically, Putin. Pressure is rising in the Russian society, and a dissatisfied society is easy to exploit for the Ukrainian armed forces. Specifically, it does a couple of really good things for Ukraine. Firstly, it removes any rally around the flag effects. So all of these that we just need to get going and support Russia to fight against Ukraine, all of that is gone. It's been non-existent for a while, but there is still a portion of the population that does support these, that from time to time they donate that money and they work to support this. Suddenly now, this is maybe not so nice after all. They're being open, for example, to some other sources of income. Let's say a Ukrainian sabotage group would like to find a willing audience inside Russia. That is already potential for additional exploitation. Donations to the Russian military, all this drive that whatever Russia is doing in Ukraine is okay. All of that is being seen now as a problem, because that problem is now being directly linked to them standing for days in these gas lines. You cannot expect Russians to have high critical level skills. They've never trained for it. But when you go to the gas station and you see there is no gasoline, and then someone tells you it is because Putin started the war, those two things inevitably start being linked. I want us to be very clear on expectations. We should not expect there's going to be some kind of popular uprising against Putin. Absolutely not. Russians will never achieve anything reasonable. We see them fail at every step, including trying to get rid of Putin as well. What is important is that Putin right now is going to tighten his grip on power. The campaign that everything is fine is going to intensify. They will introduce, already now talked about, the electronic lines, so we don't see these cars on the streets in line anymore, where depending on your car number, you can go to the gas station at certain specified time, and then you can get fueled up at that specified time for a certain amount of fuel. So they will try to get people off the streets. They will also try to supplement some of the most critical regions with the fuel they're going to be buying under the market prices. And those regions that they will not be supplementing, they will actually try to take the gasoline from those regions, and they will instead put some kind of enforcers, agents of the Kremlin, to try to suppress any kind of discontent in those regions specifically. We are very far from Russians doing anything, but it is very clear that Ukraine is doing massive economic and psychological campaign against Russia, Russian society, and perception of Russia. Because no matter of cosplay that Putin does, trying to dress up as this military guy, showing this bullshit map, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, about how delusional this map is, this is not projecting the strength it used to project. Because once you start seeing gasoline lines from space and you start seeing explosions in Moscow, and President Zelensky basically putting a whole presentation about it on a world stage, the weakness of Russia is being exposed internationally and internally. To finish, I would like to say thank you to all of the supporters from the United States, and I want to wish you the happy 4th of July, 250 years of USA. No need to think about the current leader of United States. That is beyond the point, because we here appreciate the people that continue caring about Ukraine. Majority of people in United States still care and support Ukraine, and we see that support every day. We feel it every day. So thank you. Happy birthday, United States, and God bless America, and Slava Ukraini. Trust in Ukraine, support Ukrainian armed forces. I love you, and I will see you next time.